What's up, Duke fans, and welcome to another episode of Duke Blue Central. So happy to be back with you for this episode. We are really approaching the start of basketball season as Duke plays their first official regular season game of the 2024-25 season. Tomorrow, they're playing at Cameron against Maine. It is going to be a good start to the season, kind of the Cooper Flag Invitational here. I don't know if there's a way that we play Maine in the regular season, other than the fact that the most famous basketball player ever to come out of Maine is on Duke's roster this year. So is Cooper going to take it easy against Maine? I don't know. Maybe he'll have some mercy on the school where his mom played. But that's yet to be seen. But anyways, we're getting really close. It's getting really exciting. For any Duke basketball fan, this is comes kind of the best part of the year for you. Right when the season's starting, you get to look at the new team, especially when it's a team like this where you're expecting them to do some really awesome and incredible things and have an exciting year of Duke basketball. But here we are, right on the cusp of the season. And before the season started, I wanted to do kind of an early season, or at least a preseason final kind of stats projection for this Duke team. And not super detailed projections, but just who's going to lead the team in each really important category on this roster. I know that, we've seen a lot of interesting things develop over the offseason from, back in the offseason where we were projecting Isaiah Evans was going to be a starter on this team to where now most people think he's more of a deeper bench player. The emergence of Con Knipple as becoming potentially this year's Reed Shepherd. There have been a lot of interesting developments over the offseason. I just want to give a final episode projecting what I think the roster is going to shake out to be before this season kicks off tomorrow. So let's get right into it. One of the most important questions: who on this Duke team is going to lead us in scoring? This is an interesting one. I think, there hasn't been a team like this in recent history where you don't just instantly point to one guy that without a shadow of a doubt is going to lead you in scoring. I think Flip would have been that last year for everybody. I guess you could say the year before was a question mark, especially with, Lively being the number one recruit, Flip being farther down. I don't think anyone would have projected the point totals that Flip had that year. But still, most years of Duke basketball, you go into it having a loose idea of, okay, this guy's going to be getting us 15 to 20 a night every night, and nobody else is going to be there. This team is different. Even with a recruit like Cooper Flag, scoring is a big part of his game, obviously, but he does everything so well. The scoring isn't necessarily what jumps off the screen to you, or maybe it does. I mean, everything jumps off the screen with him. But nevertheless, I have some projections. I've actually got a top three for this one. I don't have top threes in every stat line. But who I think is going to lead Duke in scoring this year, I do think that at the end of the year it will be Cooper Flag. And I know that kind of seems like a very chalky projection, picking the guy who's supposed to be the number one NBA draft pick. But listen, I want to make this clear that there's a very real possibility that another guy takes this number one spot and Cooper Flag has a successful year. Even a number one draft pick type year, those things don't necessarily have to correspond with one another, that being him leading Duke in scoring. I think there's a real world where Con Knipple can lead this team. That's who I have second on this list. And my third pick is actually Caleb Foster. I definitely think there's a world in which Caleb Foster can lead this team in scoring. And a guy that's off my list that barely missed out is Tyrese Proctor. But the thing I eventually came back to is on a points per night basis, you're going to see a lot of different guys lead Duke in scoring. You're going to have nights where Con scores 25. You're going to have a night where Cooper scores 19, and that's the high mark. You're going to have a day where Caleb Foster goes off for 22. But overall, I think that Cooper's consistent scoring is going to win out when it comes to a total point number. For example, I think it's likely that Cooper Flag is going to get at least 15 points every night. Maybe there are some days where he's going to be off. I'm sure there'll be some days where he scores way more than that, into the 20s, maybe even more than that. But there are going to be nights again where Con scores 27 and makes 5 threes or something, or Caleb does the same thing and hits 4 3-pointers and gets to the free throw line a bunch and ends up with 25. But it is easier for me to picture a world in which, in a good win in a game that Duke can win, Con could just have an off shooting night and end up with 8. Or Caleb could, miss four or five threes, have a really bad night, end up with 4 points. I don't think that's going to be ultra common, but I think that just with the way those two guys play, and I do think they'll be the second and third leading scorers. And even if you throw Tyrese in there, it's the same situation for him. We had games last year where Tyrese Proctor scored a lot, and we had other games where you looked down and he had 4 points at the end of the night. Some of those games were successful for Duke, some of them weren't. But I just think consistency of Cooper's scoring will win the day here. And there's a lot of different ways for him to score. He can shoot the ball well. He gets to the basket. He can get to the line and make his free throws. It's just, whether we have there's a world in which like you play the first 5 games and Cooper is the leading scorer on the team as far as total, but he might not have led the points for any of those games. That's kind of a drastic example, but let's say you have a 3 game stretch. Caleb goes off one game, Con goes off another, Tyrese goes off another when it comes to 3-point shooting. Each one of those guys scores 18. But right behind each one of them will be a Cooper Flag 15-point game, whereas let's say in the game Caleb goes off, Con just might not be seeing the rock as much and end up with 5. So even though I think Cooper Flag isn't necessarily going to be our night in, night out, he's going to get the most points in this game. I do think on the year, his just consistency of being able to get 15 to 20 points will win out against some of the other guys that are going to rely more on shooting to get really high point totals. So that's my projection on scoring. I know it sounds really chalky, but I hope I explained that well. Rebounding, I don't have a second or third for this one because I think it's going to easily be Common Malawach. That's about the easiest projection I think you could make, unless you're thinking he's going to get like way less minutes than what he's projected. It is clear to see that Malawach is an absolute rebounding machine, offensive boards, defensive boards. In both of the scrimmages Duke has had, regardless of the amount of minutes he's had, he has led the team in rebounding by a wide margin. And I don't see that changing throughout the year. He's by far the biggest guy on the team, biggest wingspan, and especially against smaller teams. I mean, you could have a game where he gets 20 boards, and I don't think I could, like, if he plays a lot of minutes against a team, if he's got a 10-20 game, 10-17, I mean that could happen. You could see some crazy rebounding numbers with Malawach, depending on the amount of minutes he gets. Now, there's some interesting stats when you look up previous Duke freshman centers actually haven't gone on to play a ton of minutes in a lot of years. When you think about Lively and Mark Williams are the two freshest one to mind. Their freshman years, it took them a while to get deep into the rotation, and I think on the year, if you averaged it out, they might have been getting close to 15 minutes a game or something like that, less than what people would think. Now, I actually think Common's going to buck that trend. I think it's been shown in the practices and the scrimmages. I think he is a guy who has more of a potential to even start day one than I thought. In fact, I think he will start day one. In my earlier projections, I would have told you that Malik Brown was going to start the year at center. I don't think that's the case. I think it's going to be Malawach. So I think, we could see a world in which Malawach is approaching that higher teens, even into the 20s for minutes per game, especially by the end of the year. I think that's where Shire is going to want him at. But as far as rebounding goes, I don't think anybody's even going to come close. Second place, I might put as Malik Brown, just because he's going to be the guy that's down there when Malawach isn't most of the time. Now, for assists, this was another pretty easy one for me. I think this is going to be Proctor. I think this is going to be a year where you see Tyrese Proctor play to what his strengths are, which is primarily as a facilitator, passer, point guard. Now, it's going to be interesting to see how Shire handles Caleb Foster in that role. For a lot of the Arizona State game, Caleb Foster was the initiator, and he was kind of using Tyrese in that two-guard spot, similar to what happened to Jeremy Roach a few years back when Tyrese came into town. So, there's a world in which Caleb Foster fights for this position, but we've just seen how good of a passer Proctor is, how well his vision is, and especially how well he operates in a pick-and-roll dominated offense, which I think when you have Malawach and Cooper Flag on the floor at the same time as him, it just makes pick and roll is just the obvious play call because of their size and Proctor's ability to get them the ball in multiple ways, whether it be a lob or even a bounce pass down low. His vision, I think, is the best on the team, and I think he, at the end of the day, even perhaps with handling the point guard duties less than he did last year, will lead the team in assists. Steals, this is an interesting category, and I've actually pitched a bench player, I guess potential bench player, to lead this category. I think Malik Brown's going to lead us in steals. He led the ACCs in steals last year as a part of the Syracuse Orange, and I still think I don't think he'll lead the conference in steals, just not playing as many minutes as he did last year on Syracuse. But I think he will lead the team. So many deflections when he's out there, even in these exhibitions. He's easily the guy that feels to have the most active hands in the passing lanes on defense, and he has just such a good instinct for the game when it comes to stealing the ball and turning it into fast break offense. That's going to be a critical part for this team. We've already seen in the in both of these games how fast this Duke team wants to play. Yeah, that was annoyance of a lot of Duke fans the past 2 years is that Duke actually played a lot slower than what a lot of Duke fans were used to. Typically, when you think of Duke basketball offense, it's high octane, it's getting down the floor quickly. But Shire slowed it down the past few years, and I think that wasn't for nothing. I think you had some guys on the team that operated well in a slower paced offense, especially a guy like Jeremy Roach, who I think excelled kind of, breaking down opposing defenses in the half court with his ability to get to the basket. I think that was for a good reason. But this team is going to be fast, and having a guy like Malik Brown who can steal the ball with relative ease is going to be a great blessing on this team. As for blocks, this one, kind of seems obvious to go with Malawach, and that is who I'm going to go with. But I think Cooper Flagg is going to give him a heck of a good run for his money in leading this team for blocks. The reasons you give it to Malawach are obvious. His size, his wingspan, his just obviously playing the center position bodes more to get blocks. Cooper Flagg is going to get switched a lot. I think if you're an opposing offense, as good as he is on defense, you might feel like you want to test him guarding a veteran point guard that's really shifty. So I think he has the potential to get shifted to play perimeter defense a lot, which I think he could still get blocks from, and we've seen it in some of the games. Yeah, especially in that first exhibition. I think he had 3 blocks in that game, even while guarding guys on the perimeter. But I think just the amount of times that he's going to be guarding outside just bodes to not getting more blocks as Malawach. I think Malawach does have that Mark Williams, Derek Lively effect where you're afraid to come into the paint for fear of blocking your shot. And you can also tell Malawach tries to block every shot, sometimes which is a bad thing, but that guy is going for every block that comes down his way in the paint. He's really looking to own that paint, and thus I think he'll lead us in blocks. 3-pointers, 3-point percentage, 3-pointers made. I think both of these could potentially be the same. I'm not going to count Malawach shoots 3 threes on the year and he makes all 3. That to me doesn't count. So, but I actually think these are going to be one and the same. I think Knipple is going to lead us in 3-pointers made and 3-point percentage. Just watch the guy play. I mean, if you have any, the second place guy I have on this list is Caleb Foster. I think Caleb Foster is actually kind of sneakily the second best shooter on this team. He had good splits last year. His shot is kind of funky. It's really high arcing and not, I don't know. It looks almost like a floater off of his hand, even from the outside. But I think Caleb Foster has the potential to be the second place best for the 3-point percentage and 3-pointers made on the year. Proctor's going to challenge him for that. I don't know how high Proctor's percentage. I do think Foster is going to have a higher percentage than Proctor, but Proctor could end the year with more made and more taken threes than Caleb. Caleb likes to get to the inside as well. Proctor does as well, but I think he leans in more on his outside shooting than Caleb does, at least right now. But what more could be said about Knipple? I said it in the last episode, and I've reflected on it more. He just you hate to compare him because Jared McCain was just on this team, and it feels just kind of cheating to reference a guy from last year to this year, but he feels like the end of the year version of Jared McCain that we were watching at Duke, except he's the size of a wing. Now, Jared was an excellent player, and I'm not saying that Khan's as good as him now. And again, we haven't played a real game yet. These have just been exhibitions, but the way Khan has looked in these games, man, he's got the similar motor as Jared, where he's going to go after rebounds, and he's built like Jared, but he has a larger frame for it. The guy is 6'7", is the size of a small forward, and I haven't talked about this a lot on the podcast, but I'm very thankful for the emergence of Khan Knipple on this team because I think if not for him, and especially with the way Isaiah Evans is kind of now, where we're feeling like, he might be better as a second year guy. We'll see. You never know. He could really emerge as a star even this year. But I think it would have been tempting, like if Khan decommitted or something, it would have been tempting to roll out like a Sion James or someone like that and have another three guard lineup this year. And I don't know, there's something about me where I just feel like sometimes the three guard lineup gets overused and you end up, trading off one of your biggest assets, which is size. And Khan is that kind of traditional wing size, but he has the play set and ability and shooting ability of a guard. So for me, it kind of just like put a sense of ease over a spot I was worried about. Like for example, with last year where we were rolling out the Jeremy Roach, Tyrese Proctor, or like yeah, last year's offense where we were rolling out Jeremy Roach, Tyrese Proctor, and Jared McCain. Don't get me wrong, I liked that lineup, but I still just think there's value in having like a traditional wing player. But especially on the defensive side of the ball, Jared could cover up for some of that because of his hustle and ability to get rebounds. But from a guarding perspective, I think just having that size means something when you're going up against teams that don't play three guard lineups. So I love like the intangibles and just the physical traits that Khan brings to this team as well. He kind of just like fits in perfect. It's been, I mean, this roster construction is excellent. You got Cooper Flag and you've got all these, like everybody on this team can shoot. So that John Shire knew that when he brought Cooper Flag in, teams are going to try to just stack the paint because he's more dominant on the inside. And if you have no shooters, like that's the thing. Like I don't think this is going to happen. But if Duke this year becomes a bad three-point shooting team, we're going to have some real problems because our star player is going to want to go inside. It's going to be easy for teams just to wall up, try to not let him score, and then if we kick it out, they can't hit it. Now again, I think this team has proven already that that's not going to happen. This team could be a better three-pointing shooting team than last year. And I mean, like everybody on this team can shoot except for, I mean, Malawach can shoot, but I don't think he's going to be out there for a lot. But the roster construction for this squad has just been awesome, and I think Khan emerging as like a ready to play now player has been even bigger for that, because then now you have that traditional wing size while keeping your ability to stretch the floor, and he's also the best shooter on the team. So that's an easy one for me. So all those stats, that's kind of my big like individual stats I wanted to cover. This next one I think is a little more interesting, which is who gets real playing time. A lot of the conversation on Twitter and on social media about this Duke team has been, which of these guys is getting cut from the rotation, because we know Duke is not going to play like a 13-man rotation. That's just not going to happen unless we just suffer a severe drought in talent one year, which is certainly not this year. So I have listed out the players in order of how many minutes per game I think they'll get. Now, I mean, you're going to see a trend here. The starters are obviously going to be first, but these are all in order of who I think will get the most minutes to the least minutes. At least of significant playing time. I left off some guys on here who I think are, going to play just spot minutes at the end of blowout wins. But first, Cooper Flag. I think Cooper is obviously the star player on this team. He's the key to this team, a key to a lot of the stuff we're going to be doing offensively and defensively. He's the number one recruit, the heralded number one draft pick. He's Cooper Flag. He's going to play the most minutes on this team. Second place, I actually put Tyrese Proctor. He's an older guard on this team, which time really flies. I was thinking about that the other day. It just doesn't feel like that long ago we were talking about how good he looked as a freshman and would be lucky to get him back. And now all of a sudden you look up and he's a junior, albeit the age of a sophomore, but is a junior. I think just having a player like that, having an older guard, John really likes Tyrese's game. He's a playmaker, he's a defensive menace on the perimeter. He's big, he's got size. I think he'll be up there as well in minutes. And with that experience is going to come more playing time. Next, I've got Con Knipple. Even though he's a freshman, this is it. Also, it seems crazy. Like at the beginning of the year, off season, I would if someone told me like, "Hey, Concanipple is going to get the third amount of minutes on this team, right behind Proctor and Flag," I would have just never guessed that. But I'm so happy that I think this is going to be true. In both of the exhibition games, I mean, Con has been like he is noticeable when he's not on the floor. The team is still great, don't get me wrong, but when he's on the floor, it just feels like we can kick it into another gear with his ability to shoot. He's been a better defender now than I thought he would be. I think that's something he'll develop throughout the year. But just, I think you're going to need this guy on the court almost at all times, especially towards the end of the year. So get ready to play a lot, Con. Next, I've got Caleb Foster returning for his sophomore year. Again, this is another guy in the starting lineup that I think is going to have a lot of minutes. He does have the not detriment, but there are guys on the bench. There is Sion James who could threaten for that spot if Caleb throughout the season is just not getting his point totals. It's going to be tempting for Shire to maybe put Sion in that starting spot over him. Because obviously of all the stuff Sion brings the team, such as just like Sion is a huge person. He's a huge guard, really strong defensively. This is no knock to Caleb Foster's defense. I think he's all right, but Sion, I think, is one of the better defending point guards on this team and in the conference. If we're a couple games down the line and Caleb hasn't scored more than 10 in a game in a minute, I don't think that's going to happen. But he is a guy that you could be looking at, Sion also brings you fifth year senior experience, and as you get into March and later in the year, that seems to just amplify in importance, especially depending on how you've played throughout the whole year. So, if you're looking at a guy that I think could slide, it might be Caleb Foster. You could say the same thing about Tyrese Proctor, by the way. Maybe it's the opposite, where you feel like Caleb Foster is actually running the point now. Tyrese isn't getting his. Do we put Sion in? But the thing is, Tyrese is also an excellent defender. So I think if one of the two were more likely to slide out and get replaced, it might be Caleb. Again, this is not a prediction. I don't think it's going to happen. But if you ask me which of these five am I like wondering the most about if I'm correct, it would probably be that one. But of course, I again don't think that's going to happen. I think Caleb could be again. Caleb was my third place pick to be the leading scorer on this team, and then in fifth place, Common Malawach. I think he obviously is going to be the starter. Maybe there's a chance he doesn't start first of the year, but I think throughout the majority of the year he'll be the starting center. But I do think he'll have maybe the shortest leash is the best way to put it, because I think the first man off the bench for this Duke team is going to be Malik Brown, and that can also happen with Malawach on the floor. But I think the size, defense, and steals that Malik is going to offer to this team, Shire is going to love that, and I think he will be quick to put him in the game. If anything wrong is happening, or if we need some more defense, we need some more rebounding, we need to turn him over, or if even Malawach needs a break, Malik Brown can fill in for that 5 spot, and we can kind of play a small-ish. It's still not small ball, but in anything small ball when you're taking out a 7-2 center like Malawach. But I think he'll get the most minutes off the bench on this year's team. He's played in this conference before. He was an all-defensive team member in the ACC already, playing on Syracuse. He's going to be on a better defensive team this year. I just think that experience is going to be too valuable. I think he's our first man off the bench. Second, right after him, I've got Sion James. Sion has the benefit of being able to replace 2 positions in the lineup with both of the guards. Malik can do that too, to an extent, but Sion kind of can replace 1 through 3. He could come in for Proctor, Foster, or Concanipple and essentially offer very similar things for each one of those. I don't think he's necessarily going to be the point guard vision passer of the team. So as long as you've got a guy doing that, he can be a 2 guard that can shoot the 3 pretty reliably. reliably as he's shown last year at Tulane, and even through the first couple days of practice and the scrimmages and the exhibitions. He could shoot the three reliably at the 2 guard, or if you even just need the guy who's the size of a wing, who can defend wing positions, who could pretty much switch on 1 through 4 defensively. Sion has just ultimate versatility. Plus, he's a super experienced fifth-year senior, and I definitely think he's going to see a lot of minutes from that kind of 7 spot. And then rounding out our next kind of category of the core bench players, I've got Mason Gillis. Mason's the reigning 6th man of the year in the Big Ten, and I have him as our 8th man here at Duke. But listen, I mean, if you watch practices, I just watched a video Duke put out of like John Shire mic'd up against Arizona State. Mason is constantly talking. Mason is leading this team. He's leading the huddles. He's talking to guys on how to defend, how to shoot on the court, how to position themselves. And that stuff is super, super valuable for a young-ish team like this. I know we're actually not as young as a lot of people I think are projecting us. But look, I've got 3 freshmen in the starting lineup, so you're going to be young when your starters are out there. And to have Mason come in, and also he's a guy who plays good defense. He's big-bodied, and I think he's a 40% three-point shooter on his career, which is incredibly hard to do. And I think last year he shot something like 47% from 3. Now, he wasn't like a high-volume shooter. Again, he was a 6-man at Purdue. But I think his experience is invaluable. And the next 2 guys are Darren Harris, Isaiah Evans, in that order. I think that's the order you've seen in the scrimmages and the practices. But both of these guys kind of bring you a similar style of play when they come in. They're 3-point shooters. They can handle the ball. They can get to the basket. Isaiah Evans is probably a little bit taller, slim, longer arms. Darren is a little more of I think he's a bit shorter, maybe a little stronger, at least at his age or at this point in time right now. But these are guys that I think the game is almost in hand. You could have like a 10-point lead and these guys could come in and be comfortable, but I don't see either one of them breaking into a starting lineup except if an injury were to happen. And I think these guys are going to be the guys that are not coming off the bench early, maybe not coming off the bench in the first half. These could be second half guys. These are good kind of like long relief guys. If you're up 15 in a game and you want to rest a core player, you want to rest Konkanippel in a game where you're up 15 at NC State, let Darren Harris play, 15 minutes in the second half or so. Like let him play 12 minutes and just rest Con if injury happens or something like that. But that's my projections. That's my stats projections for this 24-25 Duke team. Hopefully we can look back at the end of the year and these were correct, or maybe we had some good surprises where a guy really popped off in scoring and leads us, or rebounding, blocks, anything. But again, it's very exciting to be here on the eve of another Duke basketball season. We'll be coming to you again with another episode after Duke's first regular season game of the year, hopefully breaking down a win versus Maine tomorrow. If we're breaking down a loss, that's going to be a different episode. if this team loses to Maine, I'm going to have a seriously different tone on the rest of the season. But hopefully we get it done and we can break down that win Monday evening. But so excited for another season with you guys. If you want to help the show, leave us a rating wherever you're listening to this right now, and you can follow me over on X at DukeBlueCentral. Thanks again for listening. Hope you all have a great rest of your day. Go Blue Devils.